welcome to the Smart Publishing Impact Series. I'm Renee Loudermilk, Chief Editor at Smart Publishing, and this is the podcast where we explore all things writing, publishing, and the impact of storytelling. In each episode, I'll share insights and strategies to help you navigate the book journey, whether you're writing, publishing, or already an author. Plus, you'll hear from inspiring authors who are using their book to change lives. And if you're passionate about storytelling and ready to make an impact, be sure to subscribe, rate, and review. Now let's get started. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Smart Publishing Impact Series. I am Renee Loudermilk, your host and Chief Editor at Smart Publishing. And today we have episode 54, and it is sort of centered around Amazon Kindle's Ask This Book feature, which I talked about in a previous episode. But we're going to expand out from that because if you're watching this on YouTube, you probably see one familiar face and one new face if you've been tuning into this podcast that way, because I have two, not one, but two attorneys with me today who specialize in intellectual property matters. My return guest is Michael Porapat, and our brand new guest is his partner at Stockman and Porapat, their practice, Travis Stockman. So I'm really, really excited to introduce these guys to you. They have done some really, really great work with some of our authors around intellectual property. They are extremely knowledgeable in the space, and I think that we're going to have an awesome conversation today. So I cannot do them the justice that they can do themselves. So I'm going to hand over to, I'll pass it first to Michael, and then Michael, you can pass to Travis after that, just to do some short introductions on yourself.
Sure. First of all, thank you for having me back. I had a blast last time, so I'm really happy to be here again and spreading the knowledge that we can. I'm Michael Porapat. I am a partner at Stockman and Porapat. My focus in my legal career has been primarily in intellectual property. I started off working in video game industry and the esports industry for companies like Take-Two Interactive, and then spawned off my own pro bono law firm focusing on esports players in competitive video gaming environments. So I'm very familiar with not just intellectual property, but also the weird and new and techie kind of versions of that, because it can be really broad. And now we've opened our firm back in 2022, focusing mostly on small business and intellectual property issues, with a really heavy focus on Amazon, which is where Travis really shines more than anything else. So I'll let him take it from there.
Yeah, of course. So I'm Travis Stockman. I'm a business and intellectual property attorney, but the easiest way I describe what I do to everybody is there is the law, and then there is Amazon policy, which are two totally different things. And I've spent probably the last decade carving out the area that exists between both, utilizing that focus. Like Mike said, we deal primarily with Amazon, but really anyone with business and a lot of business that tailors to the e-commerce world. So of course, that includes the KDP side and authors. So we help creators, we help inventors, we help the people who sell on e-commerce.
Awesome. Thank you both for being here. I'm so excited to have you on the show. I know many of the listeners are really excited for you guys to be here as well. This is such a hot button topic for folks. I would like to start with Amazon Kindle's Ask This Book feature. It has been creating a controversy in the world of authors. So what I'd like to do is just sort of reintroduce it for our listeners and reintroduce what the controversy is about, and then pass over to you guys to talk about it, because I just think with AI, there are so many new slippery slopes and new applications for things that are arising. I mean, obviously we've seen all the issues around deep fake. I think I just read today that Sora is being discontinued, the Sora app, because of issues with that. So there's like all these new issues where you're probably having to interpret the law in a new way. There's not a lot of precedent that's out there for anything. And so it's sort of this like Wild West new territory. Okay. So for the listeners, for you guys, what is Amazon Kindle's Ask This Book feature, and why is it creating a controversy? So I've just got some notes here. Amazon has been rolling out since last year an AI feature inside the Kindle app that when you are reading a book, you have the ability to press this little icon at the top. It's like these little stars at the top. And it brings up this application that looks similar to a chat GPT chat style application where you can write in a question and it will answer the question for you. So I could basically pull up a book and ask any questions that I have regarding the content in that book, and the AI is going to generate and synthesize an answer for me and bring an answer back to me. Now, first, this is not on every single book. So if you are already published and you have the Kindle format and you're pulling up your Kindle app right now and you're like, wait, I don't see that little icon of the stars on there. That's because they've only rolled it out on major titles so far. Well, not just major, kind of medium and large size titles, but this year they are continuing to roll it out on a lot more books. And so it can be added to your book at any time. You will not know unless you go in there and look, because they're not asking for your permission. It's not an opt-in or opt-out. And they're not telling you that they're going to do it. So that kind of leads me into segue to, well, what are the issues? Well, the first issue that I know the Authors Guild, which is one of the largest advocacy groups for authors out there, has been really, really fussing about is there's no permission. You are powerless as an author to opt out. It's either on your book or not. It's automatically applied. They're saying there's new value being created, but the author is not being compensated for that. So they have sort of defined that there's some level of a summary, analysis, explanation on top of the books, yet they don't get, authors don't get any royalties or licensing fees. I'm kind of like, I don't necessarily agree with that personally, because I'm like, it's not increasing your sales. So where would that money come from? So I don't know. I don't see the argument for that. Maybe Michael or Travis might feel differently. This is probably one of the biggest ones here, is the potential copyright or derivative work issue. So the Guild is arguing that this effectively creates a new format of the book, like an annotated or interactive edition. And that kind of transformation typically requires separate rights and agreements. An Amazon stance, they say it's just an extension of search, not a new product. So Authors Guild is saying this is a derivative work. Amazon saying it's just a smarter search. Also, this is one that I, as an author of a couple of books, I guess a few books if you count the collaborations I'm on, this is one that kind of hits close to me. Authors cannot review, edit, or correct the AI's answers. So what worries me a little bit as an author is that somebody can pull up my book, The 1 Hour Author, ask a question, and then the AI misrepresents my intent. And now I've got no ability to step in. People are possibly getting misinformation that seems to be coming from me, but it's really not. It's just coming from AI, which we all know can make mistakes. And then there is the risk of replacing the reading experience. So now, most of us are not really doing deep research these days on things. We're just asking ChatGPT, and ChatGPT gives us like the Cliff's Notes. So now what's the chance that you're going to get my book and instead of read it, just ask it for a brief summary? And now that has essentially replaced your reading experience. And then, these last two things we'll get into here. There's the slippery slope for AI rights and licensing. The Guild is worried about the precedent this sets if Amazon can do it without permission. Other AI features could follow that continue to press that boundary by being more aggressive with more aggressive summarization, potential training, which we already know the big issues around that, repackaging. So it could undermine the future market for licensing books to AI platforms. And then there's the broader AI usage concerns, if not fully disclosed. There's some unease about whether the content is being used only for that book session or possibly contributing to broader AI systems. Amazon hasn't fully clarified the technical details. And of course, that's the lack of transparency around that is going to fuel distrust. So, guys,
we don't have anything to talk about. I don't think there's any topics that we can discuss here.
I saw you writing notes.
It's funny. I kind of before the call, I did a little bit more digging just to make sure I'm fresh on things. And I kind of made an outline of issues that I really saw. And you pretty much nailed every issue that I had on there. So I was like, all right, cool. We're on the same page here because I have all these things to talk about anyway.
Let's do it. I want to hear what you guys think about this.
So let me talk first about my gut reaction to this. So, and then I want to go into a little bit of the copyright side of it. So my gut reaction to this was that it's just another way of Amazon taking advantage of the people that are using their program, right? Amazon is so large now. Trev and I joke that we mix IP and Amazon, as a firm. But realistically, if we just said we were Amazon lawyers, we would be the lawyer for everything because Amazon does so much now that they're in so many different places that you have to know all these different things in order to be able to claim that you work so well at Amazon. So in their practices, they take advantage of their users and sellers a lot. And this is not specific to Amazon. It certainly isn't shining down on Amazon specifically, but it's just big business practice. It becomes unfeasible for them to tailor to all these different people at all once. So they make these really big, broad, vague decisions and really lock down vague contracts, and then everybody gets linked into them. So when I saw this initially, my thought process was great. Another way for Amazon to figure out how to make money, right? And I don't know how they're going to make money off of it, but it's just another way they're going to try to take advantage of the people, right? And then you think about it from a copyright perspective. You and I listed out a bunch of different options in terms or issues that we came up with. The vast majority of those, in my opinion, fit into the same bucket of, is this copyright infringement or not? And there are a lot of AI-based cases out there right now that are still working through the system. None that have come to real significant answers. But there are, tidbits of information here or there that we've been able to pull out of it. One of the things that the Authors Guild was particularly concerned about with the Ask This Book feature is how the AI is operating, which is great. And to be clear, the biggest issue around all of this is the transparency. We don't know what's happening. We have no control over it. We can't opt in and not out of that. But the transparency is kind of a vague issue in terms of why the transparency is an issue, right? And so one of the reasons that transparency is an issue is we don't understand how it's working. So Authors Guild's, one of their problems was, are you using our books to train the AI? And if so, is that use of the book? Do we give you the license to be able to use that? Now, whether or not Amazon specifically has the license to use that book to train its AI is a question in and of itself. But whether or not someone who has purchased the book can use it to train AI is actually an answered question. There's a pretty recent, I think it was 2024 case, Bart's versus Anthropic, which I think settled, which seems to happen all the time with these copyright cases, as we discussed last time. But it settled. But prior to settling, there was a motion for summary judgment that got an order on it. And the court basically ruled that if someone were to purchase a book legitimately and they use that book to train an AI model to do something, that is fair use. And their justification behind this is really smart, is that if I'm not an AI, I'm a human, and I buy 10 books and I read all those books, and then I use those books to create something out of the information and knowledge that I gained from those books, that's perfectly legal. There's no issue with that. And essentially training the AI model with that is akin to that. It's the same process. So they don't have a real argument in terms of whether or not you can use AI to train, whether or not you can use the copyright to train AI. But in this particular circumstance, we don't even know realistically if Amazon has the license to utilize it. We know based on their contracts that they have a license to distribute it. We don't know, and we don't think based on my cursory review, and I'll let Trav speak a little more about this. I think he'll know more than I do, but I don't think that they allows them to reproduce it or to modify it or create a derivative work out of it that allows them to, distribute that to the users. Their license is limited. And that is just one of the many different variations of the copyright issue that come to play here. And as we talk about the copyright issues, I want you to keep in mind that copyright in general and all issues is waivable. So if we have an agreement, and I think it's different. Trav, I'll let you talk about this in a second. I think it's different for KDP than it is for Amazon sellers, but they all have different agreements set up with them. And if you have in that agreement this very broad agreement that waives that right to utilize it, you give Amazon a license to that book and they can do whatever they want with that book, then it doesn't really matter what the copyright law says or what your right is. You've given Amazon the authority to do that.
Yeah, and part of that problem too, it's a bit vague, right? Like Seller Central, if you create a listing, right, even if it's selling a physical book versus any other product, it'll say that whatever material you put on this page, you essentially grant a perpetual license to any other seller who's going to join this listing and sell your book. You can't claim they're infringing, right? You've put an image of your product, you've done some sort of advertising, you're essentially giving everybody else who uses Amazon Seller Central a license to join that listing and advertise the same material. With KDP, it's a bit more limiting. They do have that with respect to some of the visuals, but it's a bit vague because it says they're allowed to, let's say, advertise, promote, or remit your book in a way they deem suitable. So when I see this AI, ask the book, I'm thinking more this is a remittance of promotion and advertised material. So it does give them the ability to take your content, right? And in a way they deem suitable, find a way to advertise and what they call remit this to help sell the book. So I believe when I read through this and looked at this particular feature, what they're attempting to do is find a way to market the book towards the potential customer, right? Maybe they're thinking about reading that book, maybe they're not. They want to ask a few questions to get an idea of what the book's about. I think that's where this is designed. So I do agree firmly that this definitely crosses a threshold because in my opinion, it's not just if you asked it, what page can I find this piece of information and it answered, that's one thing. But if you ask it, can you describe what the plot intention was with this particular character and what their motive was, it's actually going to generate a response. And to the same scare, what is creating that? AI is generating this information. The author may not agree with that perspective of that character and their motive, and you don't have control. So now we're really crossing this definition. Are you just remitting the content in a way to market it, or are you actually changing the intellectual property without the control or consent of the author? And that's why this is such an interesting topic. And it's really tough because when it comes to the contract with KDP or your terms of service, the first section, section 1, says you agree to our policies. And if you don't agree to it and you don't agree with the way we're doing things, then you can go ahead and terminate this agreement, recall your book, and stop distribution. The problem is what's really unfair for the authors is, and don't quote me on this because I haven't checked in a while, but there was a time where KDP represented like 90% of the ebook presence in the United States. So you can't just go to Amazon and ask them, okay, well, I'll agree to use KDP, but I want to change a few terms in your contract. Good luck. It's just take it or leave it. And usually the only way you could prove that there's no bargaining power is if you show this is somewhat of a monopoly. When they control 90% of the book marketplace online and you can't agree to a term which takes away those rights, it definitely draws some concerns. But I think trickling back to the first part you mentioned, Mike, it's for me the concern is the language is very broad. And I think the way the actual chatbot uses the language and depicts its own version of character morale or plots or intentions of the author definitely crosses a threshold and goes beyond just remitting this for marketing purposes.
Yeah, that to me is the line too, right? Like if you hadn't asked this book feature, and that's what pisses me off, excuse my language, about Amazon's response to the Authors Guild on this, because they were like, look, this is just an expansion of our normal search thing. Like if that was the case, then we would ask it a question and it would quote the book. It would be like, right, here, this is what the book says, or it would, exactly, or it would show, it would give you an author's answer or whatever. But instead, it's taking this information and it's coming up with a response. It's basically giving an opinion on the situation. And to Amazon's credit, from what I've looked into, it is avoiding spoilers. It doesn't look like there's a lot of like hallucination or fake answers on it. But even if that's the case and everything's coming out great, like it's still giving an opinion on the matter, and that to me is where the fair use line is a little blurred, right? Because using it to train the model is one thing, but if it's coming out with a different opinion, we'll call it. It's not an opinion because AIs can't have opinions. But if it comes out with a different opinion or different interpretation of what's going on in that book, I think that's a derivative work, and I think there's a really good argument for that. And if it is, there's a bunch of questions after that, right? Like we talked about last time, whether or not AI can create copyright, right? So if a derivative work is being created here, if it's being created by AI, is it still copyright infringement? Assuming that a court would rule that it's derivative work, it would absolutely still be copyright infringement because it doesn't really matter who's creating the work. The copyright is in distribution, right? If I'm sitting at home and I happen to recreate, a Beatles song on my guitar, like that's fine. As long as I'm not distributing it to the world, that's when it becomes a problem. So AI created it, Amazon's distributing it, therefore Amazon would be infringing. But I think that the way that the AI is responding is really going to be the issue here. And it's funny to me because pretty much every big lawsuit starts out this way, right? Where one company is like, well, obviously this is just an expansion of what we're already doing. The other company is like, no, this is a completely different area. And they're very confident in their response, and they really have every right to be, but somebody is wrong. Like, we don't know which one necessarily. I think that Amazon's wrong in this case, but somebody's wrong, and they both have their really good arguments into why they shouldn't be wrong. So most likely this is going to end up, much like most of these AI cases, are going to end up being something, big and fought out in court at some point down in the future.
Yeah, and I think about it's all about like who's going to be the one who's willing to do that. Is this going to become like a class action thing amongst some of the authors on there? Is the Authors Guild going to take it up? I remember the last time I really looked into this, the Authors Guild wasn't taking legal action yet. They were still trying to pursue the route of talking directly to Amazon about this, but for all intents and purposes, it certainly looks like Amazon is not changing their stance. They are not changing what they're doing. They are marching forward with this, and they're continuing to roll it out into more books this year. So,
Yeah.
I think it's only a matter of time before we see a group like the Authors Guild bring action, or even someone out there get a collection of authors together and do some sort of class action on this, and that'll be a very, very interesting thing. So, like I said, we're going to use this as a jumping off point for, more AI issues. And I know, Michael, that we talked about this way back in episode 20 something. So it's been a minute. And I know some of the listeners out here haven't listened to that. If you haven't listened to that, go back and listen to that episode. It is awesome. It covers copyright, registered copyright versus not registered copyright, trademarking, all those different things. We even cover defamation in it, which is a really hot topic that we from time to time coach authors around protecting themselves against. But I think this naturally flows into an area that we touched on a little bit last time, which you have a lot of folks out there who want to hit the easy button and write a book without writing a book. And so let's transition, now that we've talked about Ask This Book, into using AI in general to create written content using a prompt. And to create images as well, because now people are creating their cover through AI. They are creating diagrams, pictures, things that are going into their book. If it's an illustrated book, there's a lot of authors out there doing their illustrations completely out of AI. How does that, because I have this conversation all the time and people ask this all the time, well, why shouldn't I just use AI to write my book? And I certainly have a lot of editorial opinions on that. But from a intellectual property perspective, what are the potential issues with using AI through prompting to write your book?
I could jump in with one initial point, which I usually emphasize before Mike will get to his. When you use a chat GPT or you use a Gemini or any AI platform, if you really read the terms of service, it shifts the liability to you to ensure that whatever you're using it for is still not infringing the intellectual property of others. So even though AI has just created this unique image, keep in mind it drew reference from somewhere, right? It took materials from something it came across to generate this image. Even though it's created it for you, it's not some this is the most unique thing in the world. This is mine. I created it because I prompt AI. You still have the same due diligence to make sure that that design is not infringing anybody else's intellectual property. And that's a challenging thing to do because if you said you just generated a cover for a book, am I going to start looking through science fiction novels throughout the entire world to find an image that looks the same? If I actually hire an artist to make that cover, or if I truly create that cover, I have no concern at all. I know 100% I'm the owner, or I paid someone to make me a work product that's an original piece of artwork. If you generate that art through AI, like you called it, it's the easy button. But if you're going to do that, you still have this pretty big burden to make sure that that's not infringing anybody else's rights. So that's just something everybody should be aware of. And then the second really draws the line of who's the creator. Like to me personally, if I draft a book and I ask AI, hey, can you fix my grammar a little bit, or could you just double check this to make sure I didn't, mispluralize anything? That's kind of okay because you're just going through doing the editorial process. But if I prompt it to write me a science fiction novel that involves some obscure concept and it generates the story, that goes to where I'm going to, drive into Mike here about who is the author. And the author typically has to be human. So it draws a lot of questions as to the creator and whether or not that material is now protectable.
Yeah, Trav hit the nail on the head. I mean, there's two elements to an intellectual property in general, right? There's the sword and the shield. The shield being I need to make sure that I'm protecting myself and not infringing on other people, and the sword being when I do create my own work, I need to be able to enforce it. Using AI creates issues with both the sword and the shield. As Trav mentioned, on the shield side, when we create something with AI, it's using references, right? And I'm going to, as best as I can this entire show, I'm going to try to bring back to the Ask This Book feature because I think it's relevant. And I think that everybody is going to really benefit from taking it from two different perspectives. And this is a really good example of that, right? So if we're using something to create a book or using ChatGPT to create a book or some sort of AI to create it, obviously it's pulling from other references and creating something else. If we're going to sit here and we're going to argue that the Ask This Book feature is a problem because it's looking at our book and it's creating answers and that's a derivative work, well, then guess what your book is that you just created with AI? It's a derivative work. So then you're dying by the same shield there. You're just using it as a weapon in one situation and using it as a terrible piece of armor in the other. So I do think that creates a really big issue. And there is not necessarily always going to be a situation where when you use AI to generate something that you are infringing on somebody. And this is particularly an issue with images, but it's really hard to tell. If you're not the one understanding where your inspiration and where all that stuff is coming from, how are you going to be able to figure out whether or not that's infringing or not? It's going to be really difficult. And again, especially with images, which are already really difficult to figure out if you're infringing or not, depending on where your inspirations are from. So that's the one issue. The second issue is the sword. As we talked about last time, the famous monkey selfie case has evidence to us. If you want me to go back through that, I can. But has evidence to us that you need human creation in order to get a copyright registration. If it's not created by a human, then it cannot be copywritten. The prompt that you put in to ChatGPT, Claude, something like that, can be copyrighted. However, that prompt can result in various different outputs from the AI system. The outputs themselves are not copyrighted because you didn't create them, the AI did. And that means that you can't use that as a sword to enforce it against other people. So, as you said at the beginning of this, there's a business mindset and then there's a legal mindset. And I can sit here until I'm blue in the face and tell you should trademark and copyright everything. And it's probably not even true because there are things that are probably not worth the money and effort in enforcing compared to other things. But from a business perspective and from a legal perspective, it's a pretty bad idea. Unless your business model is just, I'm going to get as many books out as possible and I don't care who sues me. I don't care what happens. It's going to be a short-term model. I have some entity overseas that I, intend to, try to, get out of all my legal obligations with, or something like that. And, essentially you're running a scam. That's the only business model that works using ChatGPT as a mass model like that. So no, I don't recommend it. There are great features and uses for AI. I just don't think that's one of them.
Okay, so ladies and gentlemen listening to this, but first of all, you may be infringing on copyright, and it's not copyrightable. So I would just say, throw that list of prompts that you think that you're going to use to write your book. Throw that in the recycling bin on your desktop. And then from an editor's point of view, I'm just gonna bear with me, guys. Just I got to do my editor's rant. Oh man, I've seen AI generated stuff and there are so many problems with the way that it writes. Certainly you can use more advanced prompts to try to get it right and write a little bit stylistically, but it always drifts back to what it wants to do, which you have to keep in mind. It was trained on James Patterson style novels. And so you've got this core style that ChatGPT really likes, which lends itself to thriller novels, and it lends itself to long form social media posts. And so I have seen this all the time where someone will send me their manuscript and I'm like, oh, ChatGPT wrote this. It's very clear because everything is these pithy little 2-word sentences followed by a period. And then like each sentence has its own line. It's this line by line format. And people are recognizing it. It lacks depth. It lacks tone. It lacks an author voice. It lacks style. What I'm really just saying is it sucks. It's not good. Nobody wants to sit around reading people's Facebook posts all day. That's what it feels like to read one of these generated books, and it can only process so much. So each chapter is going to be like this long, because it's not going to be able to handle really truly making full length chapters unless you just go about it a different way. So thank you. I'm going to go back to what we were talking about, but that was my
before you do.
Honestly, I think that's a good point too, because I was going to say I never really thought of it like that, but I can instantly tell when something is written through AI. Like instantly, the moment a client or anybody sends me something, my first thought is, oh, this is AI prompt, right? And that's a great point because that's going to lack the depth. Like maybe it writes in a certain fashion. Maybe to my point earlier, it removes that pluralization error, but if it rewrites it for me, that's going to be really, really bland reading when you ultimately get down to it, and it will lack that depth. And more so, if I can identify it's AI driven, I may think to myself, well, did this person really create this? Like, is this really their perspective? So I think that's the bigger question for authors.
Yeah, I was going to say, if you really want to write an AI book, go spend $20 on an AI book and see how you feel while you're reading it, because that's how every one of your readers is going to feel. And I promise you're not going to like it. And you're probably going to feel ripped off.
Yeah. It's and a lot of these folks, they're trying to write, their intent of writing a book is to build credibility, and you just shot yourself in the foot.
Yep.
Because you did the opposite of
Yep.
that. Now you can't come back from that,
Yep. And now that's
and people can recognize it.
Yeah, and I've used AI in a whole bunch of different ways to write things, but the difference is it writes a first draft for me, and I read through it and I rip it to shreds. Like it just kind of lays out like a bullet point pattern for me, and I build it from there. And for that, it is so helpful. You don't realize how much time and effort it takes to outline something that's long, even something like emotion or something like that. Like it makes it so easy, but then I have to sit there and actually use my brain and put in my effort to expand that and make it my own. And sometimes that's for the benefit of me, and sometimes that's for the benefit of the client. But either way, AI is not enough to do that. At least not yet. Maybe it will be at some point, but not now.
Yeah. It's so funny that you say that. I actually find in a fair amount of my editing time when someone has a manuscript that has been very either AI edited or possibly even AI generated, a lot of my editing work is undoing that. Yeah. It's un-AIing it so that it looks like a credible, work with depth. And I find myself going back and asking them for specific stories that we can put in and those sorts of things. So it's it can be a starting point, but from an editor's perspective, it's a very tricky web to unweave.
I believe it. Trav and I started the firm in 2022. Before then, neither of us had owned a business. And we talk every now and then about how our mindsets and our thought processes have changed as business owners. And one of the things that I've noticed recently, some point this week, I saw a YouTube post about someone who was making some comments about, the current inflation and just how difficult it is in terms of how costly everything is. And they were complaining specifically about not being able to find a job. And they were like, look, I sent resumes out to all these things, and they go, and I used ChatGPT to tailor them to everything. And I just thought to myself, if someone sent me a resume and I could tell it was ChatGPTized, I don't even think I would look at it. Like, I just wouldn't. Like, I don't think that that's you putting in the time and effort to show me that you actually want a job. And I feel like we are in a position right now with the tools available to us. And this happens all the time with technology, where we're so more reliant on it than we need to be, that it starts becoming a problem. And, it works. When it came out, it worked really well because not everybody understood it. And the people who were, I'm going to say in charge, it's not really the right word, but the people who were in charge were older, right? And now those people who, grew up on AI, it wasn't that long ago, but 6 years ago is a long time for a young kid. Someone who was 16 at that time is now 22. Am I doing that math right? Yeah, is now 22. Now they can own their own business. Now they can be in a situation where someone's coming in using AI entirely to try to fool them into thinking they know X, Y, and Z, and they know better. And, because they grew up with that. So the generation is shifting. And that's what happens with technology in general. So you have to be careful utilizing these tools because it's much easier for people to see through it now. And the perception of that is a big deal.
Absolutely. So I know what people are out there saying, well, I don't have time to write a book though. And I do want the easy button. And it is easy. Record yourself talking. Record yourself talking, export the transcript, and send it to an editor. That's it. That's actually the process that we use for helping our authors write their book in as little as an hour of weekly effort. About 40 minutes transcribed is going to translate to about 12 to 13 pages in a Microsoft Word document that then ends up as more pages when you finally cut your trim size down to something like a standard 6x9 trim. So that is what you should be doing. Versus having ChatGPT write your book. Okay,
Frankly,
are you guys
that
ready?
sounds easier.
Yeah, way easier. And it's you, and it's unique,
Yeah.
and you're not, borrowing from all these sources. Are you guys ready for some listener questions?
Yeah, let's hit
them. Okay, let's see. Let me pull one of these out. I think this is probably sort of a seeing around corners one. Will AI written books eventually get flagged or banned on platforms like Amazon? What do you guys think? What's your wager?
I don't think so. I think that it's more likely that I guess it's more likely that they get flagged than banned. And I think that's kind of more of a political stance than it would be a legal stance. Just because I know that a lot of people are very upset about the use of AI, especially generative AI in media and in creator spaces, especially in video games. And I can definitely see that being a problem where, the platforms are like, hey, we either do not sell AI stuff because it starts hurting them as a business if they do, or, we do, but, here's the AI platform, blah, whatever. And that really just comes down to like I said, like the court of public opinion in that regard. I don't think any legal court or anything is going to strike down AI as an ability to utilize, public works or create stuff like that. But I can definitely see the pressure being high enough on certain companies where they're going to take a stance. And you'll probably end up seeing AI alternatives or anti-AI alternatives to a lot of things, kind of like Whole Foods, right? Like, oh, you're sick of all the processed stuff? Here, we just sell all the organic stuff. And you're going to have an Amazon platform, really probably a KDP platform that comes around and just goes, hey, we don't do the AI stuff. Like, there's nothing AI in here. And that'll be their niche, their avenue of success. I do think that's possible.
If anything, what I see the change is not necessarily restricting AI content outright, but maybe perhaps updating their language when it comes to enforcing intellectual property, right? Like if you have rights as the property owner to file complaints against other booksellers, I think we're going to get exculpatory language about the content being original and being your own. And not being AI driven, because technically it goes to that enforcement and protective side. So I think we'll get some restrictive language there, just kind of warning users not to do that. Most importantly, indemnifying Amazon if Amazon gets named in any trouble based off your misuse of that system. But I don't think they're going to ban it outright. And if anything, it's like it's almost should be treated like public domain, because if a human didn't create it, you can use that, but don't be mad when the next 10 people take the same exact content, have the same exact book, and there's really no way to stop it. So I think it goes to more changes in the policy and way it can be enforced. But I agree. I don't think Amazon's taking down any AI content soon.
I was going to say there might be some legal ramifications where the courts might require AI to be disclosed, kind of, like an FDA
Something
thing.
like that. That's my
But
point.
I actually, like, when I thought about it, I don't think it is, because the reason behind that would be, well, we want to make sure that everybody knows what they're seeing is real or fake. Like, okay, well, what about movies? What about TV? Like, I mean, what is it? War of the Worlds. The famous story with War of the Worlds is that it was a book told on radio, and everybody believed it was actually happening in real life when it was being told on radio. Like, is that something we have to be concerned with, or no? Because that's just the telling of the book. And I feel like there's such a slippery slope there that I don't think it would be law, except for very specific circumstances, like using in advertising, for example, similar to the attorney's rules in terms of testimony and stuff like that. Not whether or not it's a real client or whatever. We have to disclose that type of information. I could see that, but other than that, I think it would be all public opinion situations, which could shape the whole world, frankly.
Yeah, and keep in mind too, it's interesting because now that we're getting deep into this, when I browse through KDP's terms and service and just, refresh myself on it before this podcast, one thing I noticed is it states specifically that when you add content to their page, that you assure them you not only have the rights to do this, but you are the intellectual property owner, and that you've got all the authorizations and things in place to actually submit the content. So that raises a much bigger question when there's that certification in place and someone uploads something that's AI based, which based on current case law states if they're not the human creator, they can't technically protect. Are they then in breach of KDP's policies by putting that content on the platform? And I don't think anybody's challenged that side of it yet, but it's something very interesting.
I think it's just because no one's gotten sued for it yet.
Exactly, but it outright says in the policy, and I had it up somewhere here, but it says that you have all the rights, that your content is exclusive, it's your creation, that you've got all the authorizations and rights to protect it. So it's interesting on one end that a KDP author has to agree to that, but then nothing stops them from submitting an AI driven content, which technically is against that term.
Yeah, yeah, and right now, when you look in the KDP uploading section in a KDP account, they have to literally check a box that says that they have the rights, or it's Creative Commons, and they also have to self sort of identify if AI was used in the generation of any text, translations, or images. And right now, Amazon's saying they're not doing anything with that. I believe that they could eventually use that for doing, like little things like AI generated work, basically identifying it on the sales page. And badging has actually already started to happen. So the Amazon Guild has a human authored badge. And most recently we have actually, Michael, you work with Harlan Unruh. He is a children's book author. And we actually created a human authored, human illustrated badge for his books, because just as an author, he felt so strongly about making sure people know that he's not using AI in any part of his work. So the whole like Whole Foods thing, that's already starting to happen. I'm going to ask just two more questions. If you guys have the time for two more questions.
Oh yeah, I'm good.
Here's a pretty good question. Where is the line between AI assisted versus AI generated?
So to be honest with you, that's a line I've been trying to divine for a few years now. And the reason is because I have a couple of clients, excuse me, and people in my life who are trying to generate businesses that are based around AI, but still maintain the protections of those AI. So the question then becomes, at what point does it become, not human made? I don't know the general answer to that. I do know that the minimum level of authorship required for copyright is small. It's a very low bar. To give you kind of a real world example, something like font or stylized font does not qualify for copyright because it doesn't require the minimum level of authorship. Basic shapes, circles, stars, squares, stuff like that, stylized, don't really count as reaching that minimum level of authorship. But a series of stars or circles, or mixed with a font, could create a minimum authorship. So there's really not that much that has to go into it to create that, right? So the real question you have is, to what extent does the copyright, and I know this wasn't really a copyright question, I'm now putting it into a copyright question, but to what extent does the copyright then apply to that work, right? So for example, let's say I use AI to generate an image of me in a suit of armor, right? And I submit that image for the Copyright Office. It'll get registered because the Copyright Office doesn't check, but that's not copyrightable because it's AI generated entirely. But if I take that image and I go open it up in Photoshop and I, outline the character, and I go in and I brush the scales on the armor to make them shine a little bit more, and I add color here, and maybe I, delete the background and I change the background, put myself on a beach instead of in front of a castle. Like, does that create a copyrighted work? I think it does, but do I have any right to the person? Because I didn't change anything about that. I changed a little bit of the armor, but other than that, I really changed the most of the background. And to be honest with you, I don't know. I think that ultimately your ownership would be in the elements that you added human authorship to, meaning I technically wouldn't have the copyright to the suit of armor, but I would have the copyright to the improvements I made of the suit of armor, which then begs the question, what the hell's the point of that copyright then? And that's really why the line is so blurred.
I think it's a tough standard because it's just
yeah.
General is so subjective. It's all forms of human authorship. Like, there's so many different creations. There are expressions that come from other influences. So in general, it's a really subjective area of infringement. Like with trademark, you use the term, you didn't use the term, or you use something similar. But with copyright, you're really talking about people's creations. So it's really hard to define that line. When you say what's AI assisted versus AI generated, I mean, in my mind, the way I depict that, if I illustrate and draw by hand my own superhero, right? And I upload that online and I tell ChatGPT, hey, can you change his cape from blue to red? My opinion, that's AI assisted, right? It's assisted, but with my creation. If I prompt to ChatGPT, hey, can you create a superhero in general? And it prompts it, that's of course the AI creation. But it's not always going to be that so cut and dry, to Mike's point, which is why that line's so hard to define. It's easy an example like that. It becomes much more complex, especially when you have something like a novel or something that somebody wrote.
And I guarantee you that's something the courts will define in the next 10, 15 years. There's going to be a lot.
It'll take a lot of precedent because there's so many differences in each case, in each piece of artwork.
Yeah, and I think there's going to be a lot. There's going to be a lot of copyright cases that are based around AI. In fact, and I think I brought this up last time, but I think that there's going to be a surplus of very expensive, very high-tech softwares and services out there that are just going to be straight up to generate to determine what is and what isn't AI and be able to prove it. Because a lot of these copyright court cases are going to be based on whether or not that copyright is legitimate, and they're going to bring in these expert witnesses to show, hey, no, this is AI generated. Here's Steve from AI Debunkers, and this is what he's going to tell you, and they're going to pay those people to prove it. And a lot of copyright cases are going to be won and lost on that argument. I guarantee it.
Oh, and that technology, I feel like, already is starting. It's just most commonly used in like an educational setting. Colleges to make sure no plagiarism or use of AI to create an essay, right? There's already methods in detection where it puts together an algorithm and says this is likely created by AI, which for good reason. You don't want, students, how will they ever learn if AI is creating the paper for them, if it's interpreting the material for them? So I could see that same content being used later on from a legal standpoint, like you said, Mike.
The problem is it's a cat and mouse game. It's going to be exactly like computer security, where it's like, we're going to hack it in a different way, and then we're going to hire that hacker to come up with the way to stop it, and then a new hacker is going to come up with a new way to do it, and then we're going to hire that hacker to stop it. It's going to be the same thing for like the next 100 years until the robots officially take over.
Yeah, yeah, that's funny too. Yeah, the academic. I'm friends with several professors, and one of them on Facebook. I see him complain about, getting stuff from his students all the time that was clearly from ChatGPT. And another one actually told me one of his professor friends was automatically flunking anyone who handed in an essay that had too many M dashes in it, the little long dashes that ChatGPT loves to put in
Yep.
everything, just because he was using that as an indicator that this was AI generated.
Let me tell you,
And let's be
I'm an
honest,
M. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
like like M dashes have use sometimes, but like let's be honest, like college students, when any one of us we weren't sitting around being like, oh, okay, let me use I think the short code for it is Alt 0151 to create an M. Like it's not on your keyboard, you're not using it as a college student.
So two things. One, I was actually going to tell you I was a very big fan of M dashes, and because of AI in the last 5 6 years, I have on multiple occasions written an email, included an M dash, and went, no, I got to delete it. They're going to think I wrote it with AI, and I
Yeah,
changed it because of that reason. And it
yeah.
frustrates the hell out of me. And two, if you on most processing software, if you hit short dash, then type a word and then hit space, it'll automatically change it to an M dash. Not that you'll ever need that information anymore because you'll never use an M dash again, but now you know.
It's ruined it. It's ruined it for everybody. I only have two editing circumstances that I think it's okay in, and I throw it. Anybody who gives me stuff where it's in there, I throw it out and replace it with proper semicolons and commas,
I just think it looks
or
so much
sometimes
nicer.
period.
It just looks so much nicer than a semicolon.
But that detection is really critical because the next generation, right, who's educating, those are our future authors. Those are the people who are going to grow up to write the next set of books, which to come is, if you do too much through AI, you're going to lose that creative touch. You're going to lose that deep analysis and, what it really means to be an author. So it's definitely alarming.
All right, final question, and this one can link back pretty well to stuff like Ask This Book. And I don't even know if this is an answerable question. This seems pretty tough. How do I future proof my IP rights now that we're in an AI world? Should I register differently? Should I structure ownership differently?
Um, First of all, every legal question is not really answerable. I'll start with that because it's always a sliding scale. But no, I think I don't think you need to make any drastic changes. Certainly not in the way that you're registering anything, but definitely think about the way that you're running your business and the way that you're creating things. To Trav's point about future artists and stuff like that from the last question, I think the people who are going to benefit the most, and we're already seeing this in the next 20 years, are the ones who are able to use AI effectively in improving their process as opposed to replacing their process. And I think those are going to be the people who become the next Elon Musk and Bill Gates and all those people, right? Because they're going to be able to utilize that feature to become a superpower instead of kind of cheat coding the way through. And in thinking of the way that you're running your business and operating your business, ask yourself, is this something that is protectable? If it is protectable, you can never make something lawsuit proof, or in this case, AI proof or foolproof, because there's always something that can happen. And even with litigation and protections, infringements happen all the time that are not litigated because it might not be worth the cost and efforts to pursue that litigation based on the infringement that's happening. So you're never going to be able to protect everything. But I think that question sort of comes from a perfectionist mindset, which I share. I have that mindset too. And one of my favorite quotes of all time, I think, was Mark Cuban, is perfectionism is the enemy of profitability. And that is to say, don't focus on protecting absolutely everything and putting yourself in this perfect situation where nothing wrong can happen. Just do it. Don't focus so much on protecting and on making sure everything's going to go right. Sit down with attorneys, sit down with the people and the professionals around you to determine what's really important and make sure we focus on those things. But don't ever stop or slow down your business just because you're concerned that might not be protectable in the future. Like, you need to be able to generate the money so that you can protect those things. And if you take those steps and hurt your business in the long run, then you're going to end up having a ton of intellectual property protections and no money coming from them. So what's the point of the protection, right? It's always a balance. The legal avenue and the business avenue always have to be balanced appropriately. So don't change anything too drastically, but as you're creating things, think about making sure that these are things that can eventually be protected in the future, and we'll deal with the infringements as they come later on.
Yeah, less about how you register and just what you're putting into the material, like Mike said. If you really are the original creator, if you really did come up with the name, the concept, the artwork, then the registration parts doesn't change. It's easy. You get registration because you deserve it. You are the original author. You are the person who created and started using this book name or whatever the trademark may be in commerce. So, as long as what goes into the creation part is well protected and original, then the registration part is always as it's been.
And I'll add to that really quick too, just to put my business hat back on. I've been saying this for years. Be transparent and be human. Simple as that. Think about who you want to buy from, who you want servicing your car, who you want doing your taxes. It's not a robot. And I guarantee you the people growing up, now is still not going to be a robot, especially when they start making money. Everybody wants somebody to blame. They cannot blame the robot. So when you have these good services and these good products and you want to get a real following, be human, be transparent. That will come.
Absolutely. Awesome. Well, you guys heard it from not one, but two attorneys who specialize in intellectual property. I think lots to think about here. Michael, you're absolutely right. There, for some reason, that perfectionist mindset seems to poke its head out in authorship quite a lot, because we also sort of see the same thing go into self-editing and all those. Everything has to be perfect. So I think for those of you listening who are authors, take that non-perfectionist mindset to everything that you do. Nothing's ever going to happen if you never put anything out there. So you gotta put stuff out there at some point in time. Guys, where can our listeners find you?
So our firm website is stockmanporapat.com. Our Instagram page is stockmanporapat_law, I believe it is. You can find me on Instagram or all the socials at Michael J. Porapat. Trav, I don't know your handle if you want to say that.
Yeah, tstock23.
And, I'll be happy to provide emails and phone numbers that you can put on the show notes if you want, so that people can reach out to us if they have any other questions. We always do free consults, especially coming from you. So anyone who wants a question or just has, something they want to talk about legal related, please feel free to reach out to us.
Awesome. Yeah. And I highly recommend, if you're looking at trademarking, anything under that realm, these are the guys. Anything intellectual property, these are the guys to reach out to. They are already helping several of our authors and have been helping those folks. So great two guys to reach out to. All right. So thank you again, Travis and Michael, for taking the time to come on the show and share your expertise and your wisdom with everybody. For listeners, the next time you tune in, I will have yet another guest on the show, but it's going to be a permanent guest because, special announcement, Jonathan is going to start joining me for these from now on. And you'll get to hear our ridiculous banter back and forth, but you'll also get to learn a little bit more expanded content through the side that he specializes in, which is business development, marketing, all of those aspects of writing, releasing, and leveraging a book long term. So as I always say, thank you for joining me. And until next time, keep writing your story because the world needs your voice.